The wind howled like a banshee across the Montana plains, driving snow sideways through the darkness. Emma Hartwell pulled her worn coat tighter as she and her 14-year-old brother Jake trudged through knee-deep drifts, checking the fence line one last time before the storm made it impossible. At 16, she'd learned to read the sky like her grandfather had taught her. This wasn't just another winter storm, this was the kind of blizzard that killed cattle and buried hopes. Over here, Jake's voice barely carried over the wind. She followed his flashlight beam to where he knelt beside a dark shape crumpled against the fence post. A man lay motionless in the snow, his face pale as death, blood seeping from a gash on his forehead. His expensive leather boots, the kind that cost more than their family's monthly grocery budget, were half buried in the drift. A gold watch glinted on his wrist, but in the dim light and swirling snow, it looked like any timepiece. "He's still breathing," Jake said, pressing his ear to the stranger's chest. "Barely." Emma checked the man's pulse, weak but steady. Blood had frozen in his dark hair, and his breathing came in shallow gasps. "Horse accident, looks like. Help me get him up." They struggled to lift the unconscious cowboy, his dead weight nearly impossible to manage in the storm. Step by agonizing step, they hauled him toward the ranch house, their boots slipping on ice, their lungs burning from the frigid air. The warmth of the kitchen hit them like a wall when they finally stumbled through the door, the stranger's boots dragging across the worn linoleum. Their parents looked up from the scarred wooden table where they'd been hunched over bills and bank notices, their faces immediately hardening. "What the hell is this?" Frank Hartwell's voice cut through the room like a blade. At 45, years of financial struggle had carved deep lines around his eyes and turned his mouth into a permanent scowl. "We found him by the south fence," Emma gasped, lowering the man onto the threadbare couch. "He's hurt bad, needs a doctor." Martha Hartwell stood abruptly, her thin frame trembling with rage. "Are you out of your minds? We can barely feed ourselves, and you bring some vagrant into my house." "Ma, he's dying," Jake pleaded, snow melting in puddles around his boots. "We couldn't just leave him." The stranger stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I owe you, I'll make it right." Frank's face darkened further. "Make it right? With what? You got money in those fancy boots, cowboy." He grabbed the man's shoulders, shaking him roughly. "Where's your wallet? Your horse? You're just another broke drifter looking for a handout." "Please," the man mumbled, fever making his words slur. "Just need to call my people." "Your people," Martha laughed bitterly. "What people? You're nobody. Just another saddle tramp who got thrown and left for dead." She turned to her children, her eyes blazing. "Get him out of here, now." "Mom, no." Emma stepped between her parents and the wounded man. "He could die out there." "That's not our problem," Frank snarled. "We're barely keeping this place afloat. I'm not wasting food and medicine on some stranger." The man tried to sit up, wincing in pain. "I can pay when I get to a phone." "With what? Promises?" Frank's voice dripped with contempt. "We've heard that before. Every saddlebum thinks he's gonna strike it rich someday." Emma knelt beside the stranger, pressing a kitchen towel to his bleeding head. "We can't just." Frank's hand cracked across her cheek, the sound sharp in the small room. "Don't you dare defy me in my own house. We're not running a charity for every piece of trash that wanders onto our land." "He's not trash, Dad," Jake said quietly, his young voice steady despite his fear. "He's hurt. And what happens when he recovers and robs us blind? When word gets out that the Hartwells are soft touches?" Martha's voice rose to a shriek. "We'll have every vagrant in 3 counties showing up at our door." The stranger's eyes found Emma's, and she saw something there, not just pain but a deep sadness, as if he'd seen this kind of cruelty before. It's all right," he whispered. "I understand." But Emma didn't understand. She couldn't comprehend how her parents could look at a dying man and see only a burden. "We can't let him die," she said, her voice breaking. "Watch us," Frank growled. He grabbed the stranger's arm, hauling him to his feet. "Jake, get his other side. You two wanted to play Good Samaritan." "Fine, take him back where you found him." "The storm's getting worse," Emma protested. "We'll all freeze." "Should have thought of that before you brought him here," Martha said coldly. She opened the door, letting the blizzard roar into the kitchen. "Out, all of you, and don't come back until you've dumped that trash where it belongs." Emma and Jake exchanged horrified glances, but they had no choice. Supporting the barely conscious stranger between them, they stumbled back into the killing cold. Behind them the door slammed shut with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. As they struggled through the snow, Emma heard the distinctive click of the deadbolt sliding home. Her parents had locked them out in the middle of a blizzard, with a dying man, as punishment for showing basic human decency. The wind tore at their clothes as they half-carried, half-dragged the stranger away from the house. Emma's heart pounded with more than exertion. For the first time in her 16 years, she truly understood what her parents were capable of, and she would never forget it. Emma's lungs burned as they fought through the blizzard, the stranger's weight nearly dragging them all down. "The old barn," she gasped to Jake, spotting the dark outline through the swirling snow. "We can't make it anywhere else." The abandoned structure stood a quarter-mile from the house, unused since their grandfather's time. Jake kicked open the warped door, and they stumbled inside, collapsing onto the hay-strewn floor. The wind still howled through gaps in the weathered boards, but at least they were out of the direct assault of the storm. Emma's hands shook as she felt for the stranger's pulse. Still there, but weaker. Blood had soaked through the kitchen towel pressed to his head wound. "Jake, help me get his wet clothes off before he freezes." They worked in the dim light filtering through cracks in the walls, stripping away the man's sodden jacket and shirt. Beneath the layers, Emma found more evidence of wealth her parents had missed. A silk undershirt, a platinum money clip with several $100 bills, and around his neck, a medallion engraved with SM, and what looked like an oil derrick. "Who are you?" she whispered, but the stranger remained unconscious. Jake had found an old horse blanket, musty but dry. They wrapped the man carefully, Emma using strips torn from her own flannel shirt to bind his head wound properly. Her first aid knowledge came from years of tending injured cattle, not ideal but better than nothing. For 3 days they took turns keeping watch. Emma would slip back to the house when their parents were in town, stealing food and medical supplies. The stranger drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes muttering in his delirium. "Board meeting on Tuesday," he mumbled one night, his fever breaking. "Tell Richardson the drilling permits came through. 40,000 barrels a day." Jake raised his eyebrow. "Sounds like he's dreaming about being some big-shot oil man." But Emma had grown up around enough ranch hands to recognize the difference between fantasy and memory. This man spoke with the casual authority of someone accustomed to making decisions worth millions. On the 4th morning, the stranger's eyes opened clear for the first time. He tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "Easy," Emma said softly. "You've been pretty beaten up." He looked around the barn, taking in their makeshift camp, then at Emma and Jake's worried face. "You've been taking care of me this whole time?" "Our parents threw us all out," Jake said matter-of-factly. "We couldn't just let you die." The man's face darkened. "They what?" Emma quickly explained what had happened, watching his expression grow increasingly grim. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "My name is Samuel Morrison," he said finally. "I own Morrison Petroleum." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, pressing it into Emma's palm. "When I tell people that, they usually recognize the name." Emma stared at the elegant cardstock, the embossed gold lettering. Morrison Petroleum was one of the largest oil companies in the world. She'd seen their logo on gas stations from Montana to Texas. She started, then stopped. The implications were staggering. "Worth about $2.5 billion, last time Forbes counted," Sam said quietly. "I was scouting potential drilling sites when my horse spooked and threw me into that fence post." He met her eyes. "Your parents had no idea who they were turning away." Jake whistled low. "They're gonna feel pretty stupid when they find out." But Sam shook his head. "They're never going to find out. Not from me anyway." His voice carried a weight that made Emma shiver. "I need you to promise me something. Don't tell them who I really am. Not yet." "Why not?" Emma asked. Sam's smile was cold as the Montana winter. "Because I want to see what kind of people they really are, when they think I can do something for them." Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the barn's drafty wall. In Sam's eyes, she saw something that reminded her of her parents' cruelty, but refined and focused. Whatever was coming, her mother and father had earned it. That afternoon, Sam was strong enough to travel. Before leaving, he gripped Emma's shoulder. "You saved my life. Both of you. I don't forget debts like that." "We just did what was right," Emma said. "Exactly." Sam's voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. Remember that when everything changes, you did what was right. They watched him disappear into the forest, moving slowly but steadily toward the main road. Emma clutched his business card, proof that the last 4 days hadn't been some impossible dream. When they finally returned to the ranch house, their parents showed no relief, no concern for where they'd been. Frank met them at the door with his belt already in hand. "Where the hell have you been?" he snarled, catching Jake by the collar. "The barn," Jake said, not flinching as the belt cracked across his back. "Taking care of that man you made us leave to die." Martha's face twisted with disgust. "You wasted 3 days on that piece of trash." Emma watched her brother take the beating, without a sound, watched her mother strip their winter coats away, as punishment, watched her father lock away the food they'd stolen. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel afraid of them. She felt something much more dangerous. She felt like she was finally seeing them clearly. 6 months passed, like a slow torture. Emma kept Sam's business card hidden in her grandfather's old Bible, checking it daily to make sure she hadn't imagined everything. But as spring turned to summer with no word, she began to wonder if the billionaire oil tycoon had been nothing more than fever dreams and desperate hope. Meanwhile, life at the Hartwell Ranch grew increasingly brutal. Frank's temper, always quick, became explosive. When cattle prices dropped, he blamed Emma for jinxing them by bringing home that worthless drifter. When the well pump broke, Martha screamed that it was God's punishment for their children's disobedience. Emma and Jake worked 16-hour days, feeding cattle, mending fences, cleaning the house for meals that barely sustained them. Their parents ate first and best, leaving scraps and stale bread for their children. When Emma dared suggest they needed new winter coats before the next storm season, Frank backhanded her so hard she saw stars. "Ungrateful brats," he spat. "Everything we do is for you, and this is the thanks we get." Emma touched her swollen lip, tasting blood, and said nothing. But that night, she made a decision that would change everything. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday in late August, delivered by a man in an expensive suit who looked completely out of place on their dusty ranch road. Emma intercepted it before her parents could see, her heart hammering as she recognized the Morrison Petroleum letterhead. Inside was $50,000 in cash and a note written in Sam's careful handwriting. "For the angels who saved my life. This is just the beginning. Keep this between us for now. More instructions to follow. SM." Emma stared at more money than her family had seen in 5 years, her mind racing. This wasn't charity, this was ammunition. That afternoon, while her parents were in town selling what little grain they'd managed to harvest, Emma walked to the county library. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Patterson, remembered Emma from her school days and was happy to help her use the microfilm machine and reference book. What Emma discovered made her stomach clench with cold fury. The Hartwell Ranch was 3 months behind on property taxes. They owed $87,000 to the bank in back mortgage payment. Feed suppliers, veterinarians, even the local grocery store. Everyone was carrying the Hartwell family debt, probably out of pity for the children. But the most interesting discovery came when Emma researched Morrison Petroleum's current project. The company was actively exploring oil drilling opportunities throughout central Montana, with particular interest in areas with existing ranch infrastructure. Her family's land sat directly on top of what geologists called the Hartwell Formation, a potential oil field that could be worth hundreds of millions. Emma's hands shook as she made photocopies of geological surveys and oil exploration maps. Her parents weren't just cruel, they were stupid. They'd thrown away their salvation because they couldn't see past their own bitterness. That evening, she wrote a letter to Sam Morrison. Not the desperate plea of a desperate child, but the careful proposal of someone who'd learned to think strategically. "Miss Morrison, thank you for your generosity. I have a proposal that might interest you. My parents are about to lose the ranch, $200,000 in total debt, foreclosure proceedings starting in 60 days. They have no idea that you're interested in our land for oil exploration, or that you're the same man they left to die in the snow. I think they should have the chance to show you exactly who they are when they think you can help them. Would you be interested in giving them that opportunity?" Emma Hartwell, she mailed the letter from town the next day, using money from Sam's envelope to pay for overnight delivery. His response came within a week, and Emma smiled for the first time in months as she read it. Emma, I've been waiting for someone smart enough to see the bigger picture. Yes, I'm very interested in your proposal. Here's what we're going to do. I'll return to your ranch in exactly 30 days as Samuel Morrison, billionaire oil executive interested in purchasing mineral rights to your land. I'll offer enough money to save your ranch and make your parents wealthy. But I want to hear them tell me about their character first. I want them to explain what kind of people they are, how they treat strangers, how they care for their children. I suspect we both know what they'll say. Your job is to watch and remember everything. When this is over, you and Jake will never have to fear them again. Prepare yourself, Emma. Justice is coming, Sam. Emma folded the letter carefully, her heart pounding with anticipation and terror. For 6 months she'd endured her parents' cruelty, convinced she was powerless against it. Now she understood the truth. She wasn't powerless, she'd just been waiting for the right moment to strike. That night, as she lay in her narrow bed listening to her parents argue about money in the next room, Emma began to plan. She would document everything, their lies, their cruelty, their true nature. When Sam returned, her parents would have the chance to show exactly who they were, and Emma would be there to make sure they never forgot the consequences. The waiting was almost over. Soon, her parents would learn what it meant to throw away the most valuable thing they'd ever possessed. Not just a billionaire's gratitude but their children's love and respect. Emma smiled in the darkness. Her parents had taught her well, sometimes the cruelest lessons were the most important ones. They were about to get an education of their own. 30 days later, Emma watched from the kitchen window as a convoy of black SUVs rolled up their dirt driveway, dust clouds billowing behind them like a storm approaching. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized the lead vehicle. The same one she'd seen in magazine photos of Morrison Petroleum's corporate headquarters. Frank, get out here. Martha's voice cracked with panic as she stumbled onto the front porch, smoothing her threadbare dress. Someone's coming, looks important. Frank emerged from the barn, Hay still clinging to his worn shirt, his face darkening with suspicion. What the hell is this? We expecting somebody? The vehicle stopped in perfect formation. Men in dark suits stepped out first. Security, Emma realized, followed by people carrying briefcases and surveying equipment. Finally, from the lead SUV, Samuel Morrison emerged. He looked nothing like the broken man they'd found in the snow. His charcoal suit probably cost more than their annual income. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his bearing confident and commanding. When he smiled, it was the practiced expression of a man accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell. His voice carried across the yard with calm authority. I'm Samuel Morrison, CEO of Morrison Petroleum. I believe we have some business to discuss. Emma watched her parents' faces transform. Frank's scowl melted into bewildered confusion, then calculating interest. Martha's hand flew to her throat, her eyes widening, as she took in the expensive cars, the entourage, the obvious wealth on display. Morrison Petroleum, Frank's voice cracked slightly. The oil company, among other things, Sam replied smoothly, approaching with his hand extended. I understand you own mineral rights to this property. I'm interested in discussing a potential partnership. Emma had to admire his performance. Nothing in his manner suggested he'd ever seen these people before, let alone nearly died because of their cruelty. Partnership, Martha practically squeaked. Oh my goodness, yes, please come in. Frank, don't just stand there, invite Mr. Morrison inside. The transformation was instantaneous and nauseating. Frank, who had spent 6 months cursing their bad luck and taking his anger out on his children, suddenly became obsequious and eager. Of course, right this way, Mr. Morrison. Can we get you anything? Coffee, something to eat. That's very kind, Sam said, allowing himself to be ushered toward the house. As he passed Emma, who was standing in the doorway, he gave her the briefest of nods. You must be the daughter I've heard so much about. Martha laughed nervously. Oh yes, that's Emma. And Jake's around here somewhere. Good kids, both of them. We've always been very proud. Emma nearly choked on the lie, but she kept her expression neutral. This was just the beginning. Inside the small living room, Sam's presence seemed to fill the entire space. His associates arranged themselves efficiently, one setting up a laptop, another spreading geological surveys across the coffee table, a third taking notes on everything said. Now then, Sam began, settling into their best chair, the one that was usually Frank's exclusive domain, though Frank didn't dare claim it now. I'll be direct, My company has identified significant oil deposits beneath this property. We're prepared to make a substantial offer for drilling rights. Frank's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Substantial? How substantial are we talking? That depends on several factors, Sam replied, his tone becoming more serious. Morrison Petroleum doesn't just partner with anyone. We need to know we're dealing with people of character, people we can trust. Martha practically vibrated with eagerness. Oh, you can trust us completely. We're good Christian people, Mr. Morrison. Always have been. I'm glad to hear that, Sam said. Character is everything in business. Tell me about yourselves. What kind of people are you? How do you treat others? The questions seemed innocent enough, but Emma recognized the trap being laid. She positioned herself where she could see her parents' faces clearly, watching as they began to weave their web of lies. Well, Frank began, puffing out his chest. We've always believed in helping folks. This ranch has been in my family for 3 generations, and we've never turned away anyone in need. Never, Martha agreed emphatically. Why, just this past winter, we had a situation where we helped a stranger who was in trouble. Didn't we, Frank? Emma's breath caught. They were actually going to lie about it. Oh yes, Frank nodded sagely. Fellow got hurt in a storm. Could have just left him, but that's not who we are. We took him in, cared for him, sent him on his way when he was better. Sam's expression remained perfectly neutral. That's commendable. And your children, how do you treat them? The lies multiplied like cancer. Martha spoke of their sacrifices for Emma and Jake, how they'd given up everything to provide for their family. Frank described himself as a loving father who'd taught his children the value of hard work and Christian values. We've always put family first, Martha declared. These children are our whole world. We'd do anything for them. Emma felt bile rise in her throat. 6 months of beatings, starvation, and verbal abuse, all rewritten as parental love and sacrifice. She glanced at Jake, who had appeared in the doorway, his face pale with shock at their parents' audacity. That's wonderful to hear, Sam said warmly. Family values are important to Morrison Petroleum. We prefer to work with people who understand what really matters in life. Oh, we do, Frank assured him. Money isn't everything. It's about treating people right, you know. I couldn't agree more, Sam replied. Now, about that offer. I'm prepared to pay $2 million for mineral rights to your property. That should be enough to clear any debts and set your family up quite comfortably. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma could practically see dollar signs reflecting in her parents' eyes. $2 million, Martha whispered. Assuming we can come to terms, Sam confirmed. But I have to ask, since you mentioned helping a stranger this winter, do you remember any details about that incident? I was actually in this area around that time, and I'm curious if our paths might have crossed. Frank and Martha exchanged glances. Emma held her breath. Oh, that, Frank said dismissively. Hard to remember specifics. We help so many people, you know. All kind of blurs together. I understand, Sam said quietly. It must be difficult to keep track of all your good deeds. The irony was lost on her parents, who continued to bask in their fabricated righteousness. As the afternoon wore on, Emma watched them dig their grave deeper with every word, every lie, every moment of stunning hypocrisy. She almost felt sorry for them. When Sam finally stood to leave, promising to return tomorrow with contracts, Emma followed him outside. Her parents were too busy celebrating in the kitchen to notice. Did you get what you needed? She asked quietly. Sam's smile was cold as winter. More than I expected. They're even worse than I thought. What happens now? Now, Sam said, climbing into his SUV. They get exactly what they've earned. As the convoy disappeared down the road, Emma felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. The trap was set, the lies were recorded, and tomorrow would bring the reckoning her parents had been building toward their entire lives. In the distance she could hear Frank and Martha celebrating their good fortune, making plans for their newfound wealth. They had no idea that their celebration was premature, and Emma intended to savor every moment of their fall. The next morning arrived with deceptive calm. Emma had barely slept, her mind churning with anticipation and dread. Her parents had spent the evening in rare good humor, even allowing Emma and Jake to eat at the table instead of standing in the kitchen. They'd talked excitedly about paying off debts, buying new equipment, maybe even taking a vacation. $2 million, Martha kept repeating, as if saying it would make it more real. Can you imagine, Frank? We'll be the richest family in the county. Frank had nodded smugly. Always knew this place was special. Just took the right person to recognize it. Now as Emma watched the Morrison Petroleum convoy return, she felt history crystallizing around this moment. Everything that had led to this point, the blizzard, the cruelty, the months of planning had been building to the next hour. Sam arrived with the same entourage, but this time Emma noticed additional vehicles. Security personnel, what looked like lawyers, and someone with a professional camera. This wasn't just about oil rights anymore. "Mr. Morrison," Frank called out, rushing to greet the convoy with embarrassing enthusiasm. "Right on time, we're ready to sign whatever you need." Sam emerged from his vehicle more slowly than yesterday, his expression unreadable. "Actually, Miss Hartwell, before we discuss contracts, I have something to show you." He gestured to one of his associates, who set up a laptop and portable screen in the living room. Emma and Jake were instructed to sit on the couch, witnesses to what was coming. "What's this about?" Martha asked nervously, her celebration from the night before starting to curdle into anxiety. "Just some documentation," Sam said calmly. "Part of our standard due diligence process." The screen flickered to life, showing a video feed. Emma's heart stopped as she recognized the barn where they'd sheltered Sam 6 months ago. The camera panned across the interior, showing the makeshift bedding, the blood-stained towels, the evidence of 3 desperate people trying to survive. "This footage was taken by my security team last week," Sam explained, his voice growing colder. "Investigating the location where I nearly died." Frank's face went white. "What are you talking about?" Sam pressed a button, and the video changed to show medical records, X-rays of broken ribs, documentation of severe blood loss, treatment for exposure and hypothermia. Samuel Morrison, admitted to Presbyterian Hospital February, cause horse riding accident followed by prolonged exposure to sub-zero temperatures. Attending physician's notes indicate patient nearly died from blood loss and would have perished within hours without immediate medical intervention. The room fell silent except for the sound of Martha's shallow breathing. "You see," Sam continued, his mask of corporate politeness finally slipping away. "I remember everything about that night, every detail, including the 2 children who saved my life, and the parents who threw us all out to die in a blizzard." Frank's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That was you, but you were just some drifter. "Some worthless cowboy, I believe you called me," Sam said, standing slowly. "Trash. A burden you couldn't afford to feed." Emma watched her parents' faces cycle through disbelief, recognition and dawning horror. The magnitude of their mistake was finally hitting them. "But we didn't know," Martha stammered. "Didn't know what?" "That basic human decency applies to everyone, that you don't leave people to die because they can't immediately pay you." Sam's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Or didn't know I was worth billions." The question hung in the air, exposing the truth they'd all been avoiding. "Mr. Morrison," Frank began desperately. "We can explain." "You already did," Sam interrupted. "Yesterday, remember, you told me all about how you helped a stranger, how you're good Christian people who never turn anyone away. You described yourselves as loving parents who sacrifice everything for your children." He pressed another button, and audio began playing. Recordings of yesterday's conversation capturing every lie in crystal clarity. Emma watched her parents crumble as their own words condemned them. Frank tried to interrupt to make excuses, but Sam silenced him with a look. "I have photographs of the barn where your children nursed me back to health while you slept warm in your beds. I have medical testimony that I would have died without their care. I have witness statements from neighbors who saw how you punished Emma and Jake for their disobedience." Martha sank into her chair, tears streaming down her face. "We're sorry, we didn't understand." "You understood perfectly," Emma said quietly, speaking for the first time. All eyes turned to her as she stood, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "You understood that a human being was dying, and you chose to let it happen, because it was inconvenient." "Emma, honey," Frank started, but she cut him off. Don't call me honey or pretend you care about me. I watched you beat Jake until he couldn't stand because he tried to help someone. I felt your hand across my face because I showed compassion. You locked us out in a killing storm as punishment for basic human decency." Jake stood beside his sister, his young face set with determination. "We almost died that night too, all 3 of us. You didn't care then, and you don't care now. You only care about money." Sam nodded approvingly at the children, then turned back to their parents. "Which brings us to my offer. I'm still prepared to pay for mineral rights to your land." $2 million as promised. Frank's face brightened with desperate hope. You'll still, but Sam continued, there are conditions. First, you'll publicly admit what you did. A full confession, recorded and witnessed, detailing how you left an injured man to die and punished your children for trying to save him. And second, he said, producing a thick legal document, you'll sign over full custody of Emma and Jake to me, along with college funds and trust accounts for both children. The silence that followed was deafening. Choose, Sam said simply, your children, or your money. Show me what really matters to you. Emma held her breath, already knowing what the answer would be but needing to hear it spoken aloud. Frank and Martha exchanged a long look. When Frank finally spoke, his voice was hollow but decisive. Where do we sign? And there it was, the final damning proof of what her parents truly were. Faced with losing their children or losing their wealth, they chose wealth without a moment's hesitation. Emma felt something break inside her chest, but it wasn't her heart. It was the last chain that had bound her to these people, the final thread of hope that they might be capable of love. She was free. Jake, she said softly, taking her brother's hand. Let's go. As Sam's lawyers prepared the custody papers and Martha signed away her children with steady hands, Emma walked out of the house that had never really been a home. Behind her she could hear her parents already discussing how they'd spend their blood money. The snow had finally melted, and spring was coming to Montana. For the first time in her life, Emma Hartwell was looking forward to the future. 5 years later, Emma stood in the marble lobby of Morrison Petroleum's headquarters in Houston, her law degree freshly minted, and her future stretching ahead like an open highway. At 21, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived the worst and emerged stronger. Ready for your first day? Sam asked, approaching with the warm smile she'd grown to love over the year. At 68, he moved a little slower than when they'd first met, but his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had built an empire. More than ready, Emma replied, adjusting the blazer of her professional suit. Though I still can't believe you're making me start in the mailroom. Every Morrison executive starts at the bottom, Sam chuckled. Even adopted granddaughters, especially adopted granddaughters who think they're too smart for their own good. The transition hadn't been immediate or easy. Those first months after leaving the ranch, Emma and Jake had struggled with guilt, anger, and the complicated emotions of abandoning their biological family. Sam had been patient, providing them with therapy, education, and most importantly, the steady presence of someone who actually cared about their well-being. Jake, now 19, was finishing his engineering degree at M. Their weekly video calls were filled with excitement about his robotics projects and internship applications. The scared 14-year-old who'd helped drag a wounded stranger through a blizzard had grown into a confident young man who believed in himself because someone had believed in him first. Any word from the ranch? Sam asked, as they walked toward the elevators. Emma's expression darkened slightly. Martha called last week. The money's running out faster than they expected. The aftermath for Frank and Martha had been swift and predictable. With $2 million, they'd lived like kings for about 18 months. New trucks, expensive vacations, a complete renovation of the ranch house. But money without wisdom was like water in a broken bucket. Bad investments, loans to fair-weather friends, and pure foolish spending had eroded their windfall steadily. The oil drilling on their land had proved profitable, generating steady royalty payments, but Frank's gambling problem, and Martha's shopping addiction, consumed everything as fast as it arrived. They'd mortgaged the future payments, borrowed against the land itself, and now faced foreclosure once again. She wants money, Emma continued, claims we owe them for raising us. What did you tell her? The truth, that they made their choice 5 years ago, and we made ours. The elevator doors opened, revealing the executive floor where Emma would eventually work, once she'd earned her place. Sam had insisted she understand the business from the ground up, not because he doubted her intelligence, but because he wanted her to appreciate the value of honest work. You know, Sam said as they reached the ground floor, I've been thinking about expanding our charitable foundation, specifically, programs for children in difficult family situations. Emma smiled. She'd been expecting this conversation. The Emma and Jake Foundation, something like that. Who better to run it than someone who understands what those kids are going through? It was typical Sam turning their painful experience into something that could help others. Over the years, Emma had learned that true revenge wasn't about destruction, but about building something better from the ashes of what came before. I'd like that, she said, after I've proven myself here first. Naturally, though I should warn you, the board of directors can be ruthless. Especially the chairman, Emma laughed. I think I can handle one ornery old oil man. Their conversation was interrupted by Emma's phone buzzing. She glanced at the screen and frowned, a number she didn't recognize, but with a Montana area code. Emma, is that you? The voice was older, rougher, but unmistakable. Frank. She hadn't spoken to her biological father in 3 years. Listen, honey, I know things ended badly between us, but we're family. Blood is thicker than water, right? We need help, and I know that Morrison fellow has been good to you, kid. Emma looked at Sam, who nodded encouragingly. This was her choice to make. Frank, she said calmly, do you remember what you told me the last time we spoke? You said I was ungrateful, that everything you did was for my own good, that I'd come crawling back someday. Silence on the other end. Well, here I am, not crawling, walking upright, with dignity toward a future I built with people who actually care about me. And you know what I learned? Family isn't about blood, it's about love, sacrifice, and showing up when it matters. She paused, watching office workers hurry past with their coffee and briefcases, all of them pursuing dreams that her biological parents had tried to convince her were impossible. You had a choice that night in the blizzard, she continued. You could have chosen compassion over convenience, love over selfishness. You made your decision then, and you made it again when you signed those custody papers. I'm not your daughter anymore, Frank. I'm Sam Morrison's daughter, and Jake is his son, and we're exactly where we belong. But Emma, goodbye, Frank. Don't call again. She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her purse, feeling oddly calm. How do you feel? Sam asked gently. Free, Emma said without hesitation. Completely free. As they walked toward the building's entrance, Emma caught sight of her reflection in the glass doors, a confident young woman in a sharp business suit, carrying herself with purpose and dignity. The frightened 16-year-old who'd once begged her parents not to leave a man to die was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true strength came from choosing to be better than your circumstances. Sam, she said as they reached the sidewalk, thank you for everything. The old man's eyes grew misty. Thank you, Emma, for saving an old fool's life in more ways than one. Even if we'd known who you were that night, we would have done the same thing. I know, Sam replied, that's exactly why you deserved saving. As Emma walked toward her new life, she thought about the wounded cowboy she and Jake had found in the snow 5 years ago. They'd seen a human being in need and acted with compassion, never dreaming that single act of decency would change their lives forever. Her parents had been right about one thing. Actions had consequences. They'd chosen cruelty and paid the price. Emma had chosen kindness and inherited the world. The snow was gone, spring had arrived, and Emma Hartwell Morrison was ready for whatever came next. Behind her, in a small Montana ranch house, 2 bitter people sat surrounded by their diminishing wealth, finally understanding that they'd thrown away the most valuable things they'd ever possessed. Not the gratitude of a billionaire, but the love and respect of their children. But that was their story to live with. Emma's story was just beginning.